Hello, good evening, everybody. It's Sunday, the 7th of February, and welcome to another debate night. As you know, our topic or our motion for tonight's debate is the Gambia became independent on the 24th of April 1970, not 18th February 1965. And that is going to be that is the topic for tonight's debate. And I have very formidable debaters who I'm going to introduce shortly. And in addition to that, there are studio guests who are also part of tonight's program, and they would join us once we get to the question and answer session. So just for the benefit of you, the online audience, the format of the debate would be, once we start, each side would have 10 minutes to make their opening remarks and then put their case across. And after that, we'll have a short commercial break. Then we'll come back. Then either side would also have 5 minutes to either reinforce their case or to rebut anything that their opponent has put forward. Then after that, we'll also have a very short commercial break again. When we come back, then we will have the half-an-hour question and answer session. And the final leg of the debate, or the final segment of the debate, would be the closing remarks. Either side or both sides would have 2 minutes maximum to wrap up and make their closing arguments. And after that, we will go into the final phase and announce the results. So with regards to the voting, there was some online voting that took place before the debate, and the results of that would be announced when we start the second segment of the debate. That result does not determine who the winner is tonight. What is going to determine who the winner is tonight would be the votes that are cast before the end of the debate. So if you are watching, I would strongly encourage you to vote once the link is shared. The link would be shared shortly. It would be shared in the comment section, and there's also when we get to the question and answer session, for those of you that are watching us, the audience, you will have an opportunity to ask questions to any of the speakers. To ask questions, all you have to do is send your question to the or put your question in the comment section. And also, just to say that there is a phone number that you can also send your questions to, and I will get that phone number for you shortly. You can either send a direct text, or you can send a WhatsApp message to the phone number to ask your question. And the phone number is 07. In fact, no, what I'll do is, I haven't got the phone number with me right now, but what I'll do is I'll read out the phone number when we get to the question. And in fact, the phone number is on the screen now. You can see the WhatsApp number on the screen. You can either post your comment or send your questions to the number that you can see on the screen right now, which is +44 78 49 473 628. So now I will introduce the participants of this debate. Just to recap, the topic for tonight's debate is the Gambia became independent on the 24th of April 1970 and not 18th of February 1965. Just to set out some background context to this, I'm sure most of you who are familiar with Gambia's history, or the Gambia's history, would be familiar with this. But obviously, the Gambia attained internal self-governance in 1963. This was immediately after the general elections of 1962, which was won by what later became the PPP, but at the time, what later became the People's Progressive Party, but at the time, it was the Protectorate People's Party. So they won the general elections. In 1962, they had more seats in the House of Representatives, which is today called the National Assembly. So following that elections in 1963, when Gambia attained internal self-governance, then the leader of the PPP was the late Alhaji Sadauda Kairaba Jawara became the prime minister, and that was in 1963. So in 1965, an event happened on the 18th of February 1965. So without prejudicing this debate, an event happened on the 18th of February 1965, and later on in 1970, on the 24th of April 1970, another event occurred. Another significant event occurred. So for our debaters tonight, one side believes that what happened in 1965 was not independence, but rather what happened in 1970 was independence. But the other side, obviously, are of the view that what happened in 1965 was actually independence, which actually is the official position, that what happened in 1965, the precise date being the 18th of February, was independence, and what happened on the 24th of April 1970 was republic. This is the official position which one side of the argument tonight would be advancing, and the other side would obviously be advancing the reverse. So without saying any further, I'll just move now to introduce the participants of this debate. For the motion, we have Mr. Kexx Sanneh, who I'm sure is no stranger to most of you watching. Kexx Sanneh is a PDOIS activist, and he's very active online. And for those of you who are who follow the proceedings in the National Assembly, you would notice the name that Kexx is the one that usually shares the live proceedings of the National Assembly on Facebook. He is going to be speaking for the motion. We were supposed to have Mr. Bakary Bah, also a PDOIS activist, who was supposed to be debating alongside Kexx, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, he is not able to join us tonight. So Kexx is going to be on his own, but I'm sure Kexx is more than formidable and capable to take on the other side, even though there's two of them on the panel. So we'll see how that pans out. And debating against the motion, we have Mr. Louie Colley. who is going to be debating against the motion alongside Mr. Melville Roberts. So the two of them are going to be debating against the motion tonight. Of course, Melville needs no introduction. I'm sure most of you watching would know who Melville Roberts is. He's a Gambian lawyer, and he's a diplomat as well, and he worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Gambia. And Louie Colley also is a Gambian based in the diaspora, and he's a very strong advocate of the position that actually the Gambia became independent in 1965 and not 1970, and that is why he's here to advance that case. So now we are going to go into the substantive program. So we'll have Kexx. The floor is yours. You have 10 minutes to advance your case.
Thank you once again. Thank you very much for having me. This is Kexx Sanneh, and good evening to all my audience here today. And it is important to have such platform, to discuss about the history of our country. And for me, I didn't see it more as a debate, but more of exchanging ideas in order for us to have an informed choice in regards to when did Gambia get independent. And I believe in the school of thought of those who claim that Gambia became independent in 24th April 1970. And that's my position. And today I will be speaking in favor of the motion that we gain independent in 24th April 1970 rather than 1960. And but before going further, I would just want us to first define what do we mean in our dictionary terms or other terms. What do we mean independent? If one said what does independent means, automatically it will tell you that independence means somebody or an institution or a country that is not having a control or internal or external control outside, but it's independent on its own. It doesn't influence. It's not influenced by any other person, but the person is do things on its own. And independence means that you will not be controlled by the outsiders. And precisely why I argue that 1965 we didn't have independence, because in 1965 we still have the governor who is represented by the Queen of this country, the Queen of England, here representing, and he owe allegiance and obedience to the Queen of England. So precisely this has been my argument that Gambia gained independence on the 24th April 1970 when Gambia became a sovereign republic that doesn't owe any obedience or adherence to any foreign power, but to the land, to the voice of the Gambian people. This was the day when we become a constitutional and self-determined and sovereign republic. So for me, the genuine independence was not in 1965, but in 1970. This was the day when we have all rights, we hear obedience or adherence to any other foreign power, but to the Gambian people, and we adhere to the constitutional rule of this country. 1965, if I am going to debate, I will say that yes, it could be rightly defined as the day when we have internal self-governance, but under a constitutional monarchy. We were under a constitutional monarchy in 1965, so we didn't gain independence. This is why precisely we have John Paul, who was appointed as the Governor General representing the Queen here, later replaced by Faraman Singate in 1966, still now under a constitutional monarchy, adhering to the Queen of England and listening everything comes from the Queen of England in terms of what has to be done and what not to be done. So for me, the Prime Minister was here and he was acting with the rules and the regulations or any adherence to the Queen. The Queen will dictate whatever is going to happen in this country, and the person will act in accordance with the dictates of the Queen. So the Governor General owe obedience not to the Gambian people by law, but to Her Majesty of England. So he was here representing Her Majesty in England rather than representing the Gambian people. So this was there until, if you look at even our constitution, section 29 of 1965 constitution, you will find out that, it's clearly stated that, the governor was appointed by Her Majesty and shall hold the office for Her Majesty pleasure. So actually she was not holding the office for the interest of the Gambian people, but she was there, represent Her Majesty of England, representing her, and he owe obedience, adherence to Her Majesty. And this is why if you go, even when the person will take an oath of office, precisely you will see that he will say that I do solemnly swear that I will do all. I will serve Her Majesty and her successor in the office as a Governor General of the Gambia. So help me God. So you will find all those things. She's not even taking an oath, in the name of the Republic of the Gambia, but she's taking an oath in the name of Her Majesty that he or she is representing. That's precisely, if you go up to section 32 of the 1965 Constitution, you go for that there will be a parliament which shall constitute Her Majesty and the House of Representatives. So still now, even in our parliaments, you will find out that, Her Majesty has a position there, that's, the parliament, will constitute Her Majesty and a House of Representatives. So we didn't get actually fully independent. Everything that we do is dictated by Her Majesty. It goes further, it controls everything. So for me, this has been my argument that we doesn't get what we get is internal independent, but we have been controlled by foreign powers. Her Majesty until 1970 when we fought and we get our 1970 constitution. Then we become a sovereign republic that owe no obedience or adherence to any other foreign power, but to the Gambian people. So precisely this has been the argument, but most people will still say that we gained independence in 1965. Yes, it was a process and we didn't get fully independent. 1965, what we gained was internal independence, but externally still now we have been controlled by Her Majesty and the people of England. So the Gambia has been a constitutional monarchy in 1965, and we had to attain the full sovereign existence in 1970. And the people were, in 1964, we were subjected to the control of outside. Until 1970, we become a sovereign republic. And the wing has changed across the British colonies in West Africa, and Gambia became the last country in the West African region that obtained those independence, that full control of. We own no adherence or control over any other person, but to the Gambian people. So, but by then, when in 1965, we still have the Governor General, who even has the authority, who doesn't has the authority to appoint what we call the constituency boundaries for the purpose of election on behalf of Her Majesty. So still now, even our representative, it has to be influenced by Her Majesty. The Governor General has the power to assert laws on behalf of Her Majesty. The executive power in the Gambia was vested in Her Majesty, that is under the 1965 Constitution. It went further, until in 1970 when Gambia became a sovereign republic that we owe no obedience or adherence to any other foreign power, but to the Gambian people. It was that day that the members of the parliament and the cabinet were required by the Constitution of Gambia to honor obedience or adherence to any other foreign power, but to the Gambian people as a nation. So it was in 1970 that all these powers that we have, all this adherence that we have, in 1970, we owe no adherence or obedience to any other foreign power, but the power was vested in the hands of the Gambian people. We determined the way and the manner in which we will be governed. So we were not controlled by any. But in 1965, we were still controlled. Decisions were taken by Her Majesty on, somebody acting, either the Governor General who was acting on behalf of Her Majesty pleasure. So it was in 1970 that we get full independence, and this has been my position for quite a long time, that we never get independent in 1965. What we get is what we call internal independence, that at least we do some things on our own. But still now we are subjected to the and I will make sure that I put this position very clear, that for me, my position is still clear, that we gained independence in 1970, not 1965, because we were controlled by an individual. All the powers of our right to self-determination and freedom of economic and political independence were still controlled by Her Majesty, the Queen in England. So until we have to fight, so many battles, and it was there in 1970, a constitution will make the beginning of existing as a sovereign people that owe no adherence or obedience to any other power. It makes the Gambian equal owners of the country, and equal power was determined by.
It looks like we have lost Kexx. It looks like we have lost Kexx Sanneh there. And I just stopped the clock. I stopped the clock for Kexx at 8 minutes 30 seconds. He had 1 minute 30 seconds to finish off. So I think what we can do is I will try and see if I can bring Kexx back, because ideally I would say I will go straight to the next speaker, but obviously Kexx would have to be on to be able to rebut what the next speaker is going to say, which is going to be the next segment. So it looks like we have Kexx back. Kexx, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. The network just going
okay.
on.
Yes, you have 1 minute 30 seconds to go. Yes, you can carry on.
All right, thank you very much. So for me, 1965, one would have said that it was the first step taking the Gambian people to attain what we call self-determination and independence. But this day has been celebrated by the First Republic, Second Republic, claiming that it was the day that Gambia attained its independence. But for me, still now, my position is very clear in regards to that, because you look at all the 1965 Constitution, it is very clear that the executive power is vested in Her Majesty, and there shall be a parliament which constitutes of Her Majesty. So still now for me, if the executive power will be vested on somebody who is an outsider, then that means that we doesn't have independence again. Because if you mean independence, like I made the first definition at the starting, that independence means that you will not be controlled by any outsider, but you will be controlled by the vast majority of the Gambian people that votes you into power. Those will dictate how and the manner and the way the country will be governed. So, but if the 1965 Constitution is telling you that all the executive powers will be vested in Her Majesty, that tells you that we didn't attain a fully independent, that we are an independent state. And this has ever been my argument. So it went up to 1965 when we have no control over anybody. So I will argue that 1965 was a step towards attaining the independence, but we fully get independent in 1970, not 1965.
Okay, thank you very much, Kexx. You had 9 seconds to spare, but nonetheless, you have managed to squeeze in all your points within time. So what we'll do now is go to the other side, which are going to advance a case against the motion that the Gambia became independent on the 24th of April, 1970, and not the 18th of February, 1965. So speaking against the motion would be Mr. Louie Colley. Louie, your 10 minutes is about to start, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Mr. Sanneh, for that strong opinion. But also to use that are following us online. Thank you for that as well. I would say Mr. Sanneh, to one extent, did the job, did part of my job much easier. But I mean, my position is that the Gambia actually became independent in 1965, contrary to the position that Mr. Sanneh holds. And I think for us to examine this position thoroughly, I think we need to look at it from a historical context, and identify what were the reasons for independence. Okay, what were the precipitating factors at that time when our forefathers were talking about independence? And also we look at independence at that time, what it actually meant, Hopefully, by having an understanding of those two questions, it will help us understand if indeed the Gambia attained her political or regained her political independence in 1965. Okay, now I want us to look at Africa in the 1950s. Oh, yes, 1950s coming up to 1994, when apartheid was finally dismantled in South Africa. Okay, and what were the reasons for independence at that time? Because yes, there was a change. You know, the wind of independence was blowing around our continent. You know, over the continent. But what were they? What were the reasons? It was mainly, you know, the political leaders at that time. Their main focus was the colonization struggles. Those were the main things. That's one of the main factors for the fight for independence. Okay, and what was it at that time? What did independence mean at that time? Okay, well, so there were so many reasons, and so many people will tell you various versions of what independence actually means. But at that point in time, independence was the liberation of one's self to participate on issues that are pertinent to, you know, to the advancement of one's state. Okay, the freedom for one to practice their religion, among other things. Okay, so those were, I would say, one of the two of the main reasons why, okay, independence at that time was very pertinent. And to an extent, one would argue that, okay, one would agree with me that, in fact, you know, in essence, that's what independence is. Okay, now the issue of independence was a process, and Gambia was in an exception. If you look at other African countries, the likes of Ghana, the likes of Sierra Leone, I would say Nigeria, the process that was in those places was similar to what was in Gambia. Okay, in Gambia we had the 1964 Constitution. Okay, the 1964 Constitution gave rise to our independence in 1965. Okay, that's where the process started. Yes, it was a monarchical system of governance. We had the Queen being the head of state, represented by, okay, by the Governor General. Okay, but we have to understand that the role of the Governor General at that time was just ceremonial, because at that time, simultaneously, there was a House of Parliament. And the House of Parliament, that's where the power of the people resides. So it was a system that is similar to what we have in here, is the Westminster model. Okay, we have the House of Parliament, that's where the power resides. The Queen has less powers in controlling the affairs of the nation. So that was the system of governance that was instituted in the Gambia. Okay, and yes, we had Sir John Paul being the first Governor General. As I said earlier, his role was just ceremonial. He was just holding that position for the Queen. Okay, and then that was he held that place and that position from 1965 till 66. Then it was handed to Sir Farimon Singate. Sir Farimon Singate held that position from 1966 till 1970. Meanwhile, Sir Farimon Singate was a Gambian himself. He's a Gambian himself. Okay, so he was a Gambian governor, and as I said, his role was mainly ceremonial. Okay, now again, we've talked about the House of Parliament instituted being in place at that time. The House of Parliament, the individuals who were occupying the House of Parliament is the same as today. They were elected members. They were elected members representing the people. They would make laws that the Queen or the Governor General has no influence over. Okay? Now, we could say that system of governance, as I said earlier, wasn't unique to the Gambian politics. It was across sub-Saharan Africa. If you look at, for instance, Ghana, when Ghana regained her political independence in 1957, Ghana eventually, I think in 1971 or so, that was a time when it became republic. We can talk of Sierra Leone, for instance. Sierra Leone, I think Sierra Leone became independent in 1961 till 1971 when it became a republic. Okay, we cannot say then those countries are not independent, you know, until at that time. Okay, I think The system of governance that was there was just was a typical British post-colonial rule. It wasn't unique to the Gambia. It was all across former colonies of Britain. That is contrary to the Portuguese style of governance. I mean, if you look at Portugal's engagement or involvement in Timor-Leste or East Timor, the Portuguese are well known for extracting resources in countries that they govern, so having less hands in the politics of the countries that they are actually in, which is, as I say, contrary to the British style of governance. I mean, this system of governance, it is till to date, we're looking at, well, as I said, until to date, countries like Belize, we're looking at Australia, we're looking at, we can talk of Jamaica. They still have that monarchical system of governance. The Queen is still the head of state. And we cannot say, if we're to use this logic, we cannot say in no way, or no one can argue against the fact that those countries that are not independent. But the Queen is still the head of state. Okay? And what I want to put across is that at every stage of the African struggle for independence, well, at every stage, there was a specific struggle. That specific struggle requires a specific approach to it. And we can use, for instance, the African Union. When the African Union was established, for instance, its main focus was to serve as a stabilizing unit. Okay, and as time went on, it was then, well, it was the OAU, and then later restructured to be, the African Union. And the focus at that time was, okay, now we've got our independence. Now we are focusing on more of regional integration. We are looking at more on, how can I put it? So we are looking at basically the Pan-African socialist ideologies, how we can collaborate, work together. It's the same thing with ECOWAS. When ECOWAS was created in 1975, for instance, the focus was pretty much looking at security, because then security was, conflicts were very common in Africa, and it was seen as an external figure. Now we've passed that stage. The regional bloc is looking at more into trade. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is independence is a process. Once that process is completed, the focus is then switched to something. But of course, before we are where we are, the process that was initially instituted, and laid the foundation for what we are. So hadn't been, it wasn't the 1964 Constitution that gave rise to the independence, we wouldn't be a republic in 1970 in the first place. And as I said, all these countries, Australia, Jamaica, Canada, still have the Queen as the head of state. And no one in their right mind would argue against the fact that, yes, these countries are not independent. So to that end, so in light of all these factors that I've put across, I strongly believe, yes, the Gambia attained or regained her political independence in 1965, contrary to the notion that it got it in 1970. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louie. And to those of you who are watching us live, just to remind you that the live voting would open at 8 o'clock. So please do ensure that you cast your vote, because otherwise it would be meaningless to just watch and not vote. I am sure those of you watching have a position, or if you don't have a position, if you're still undecided, hopefully one of the sides would pull you towards their position. But just to emphasize, it is really important that you vote. The link would be shared. The link to vote would be shared shortly, and voting would open at 8 o'clock. But you don't have to cast your vote straight away. You can wait until the end to cast your vote. When we get to the end, after the closing arguments, we'll leave a window of about 5 minutes to allow for people to vote, just in case you have not managed to make up your mind up to that point. So now we are going to take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we will move on to the next segment, which is going to be the rebuttals. Both sides would have the opportunity to either reinforce their own position or to rebut the position of the other side. So see you soon.
With the risks associated with land transactions in an unregulated property industry in the Gambia, Horizon Solutions offers a one-stop quality assurance service suited to every buyer's need. This is Ali. He paid hundreds of thousands for a plot of land but received no title and no land. Ali's friend John also paid lots of money to an agent who no longer picks up his calls, and he now risks losing all his investment. Salima, having learnt of her friend's experience, is put off buying land altogether. These friends' experiences are more common than society appreciates. Horizon aims to help you avoid being another victim. Contact us today at horizongambia@gmail.com, WhatsApp 220-264-5680, or visit us at Manjai Kunda Road, opposite Atlas Filling Station.
Sponsor a Gambian girl through SAG Foundation. We are placing girls on the path to success through education. Our aim is to realize a Gambia where every girl is given equal access to education to reach their full potential. This is how we do it through our model of affecting generational systematic change. This is Amy. She is not in school, an underprivileged girl excluded from school due to lack of financial support. The SAG Foundation enrolled her into school, and she is equipped with all the essential resources to have a quality education. Amy is now making a difference in her community. Amy is now contributing towards the generational systematic change. Education changes everything for a girl.
Welcome back, and we are now going to move on to the next segment of the debate, which is going to be the rebuttals, just like I explained before our short break. But before we do that, I am now in a position to announce the preliminary results. Just like I said at the start, these preliminary results are the results of the voting which took place before the debate started. So it is not the result that is going to inform who wins the debate. What it does is it sets the baseline, and whichever side does better than the other would obviously be declared the winner of tonight's debate. But it is important to note that the results that I am about to announce would set the baseline. So the results should come up on the screen shortly. And as you can see, the preliminary results, which is the voting that took place before the debate started, 50% of everybody who voted are in support of the motion that the Gambia became independent on the 24th of April 1970 and not 18th of February 1965. And 30% are against the motion, and 20% were undecided. So, like I said, this sets the baseline. So it means for yes to win, or for the side arguing or debating for the motion to be the winners, they have to do better than 50%, or at least retain that position. Likewise, for those against the motion to win, they have to do better than 30%. So now what I'll do is I'll just move on straight to the next to the substantive issues for this segment, which is to invite our first speaker to to rebut what the other side said earlier or to reinforce their own position. And I will invite Kexx Sanneh, who is debating for the motion. Kexx, you have 5 minutes to either reinforce your own position or rebut anything that the other side had said in their opening arguments. Kexx, the floor is yours.
Yeah, my mic was mute. Actually, yeah, actually, it's very interesting regarding my brother Louie has made a very important points and very strong points in terms of the argument. But all what I want to say is regarding, he made an argument regarding that, we have a parliament that was constituted by Gambian people who make decisions in regards to the Gambia, in favor of the Gambian people, and he made this argument that those people were Gambians and they were making these laws and any other more whatever they are doing in parliament, they are doing it for the interest of this country, which I have no disagreement. But it is in the same 1965 constitution that gives the power to the Her Majesty that anytime she can dissolve that parliament. So meaning that anything that has to be done in parliament must be in her interest. If anytime she feel like this is not her interest, she can dissolve the parliament at any time. And that is very clear in our 1965 constitution that Her Majesty has all powers vested in her, to dissolve the parliament at any time. So for that being the case, that automatically tells you that we didn't even have an independent, though we have what we call people representative in parliament, but those people has to do or has to make any law that is not in the interest of Her Majesty. She is given those powers to dissolve those parliament, and we go in for election or he dissolves the entire, and what we will have is called the executive will control until we go and constitute another parliament. So that automatically tells you that still now we are not independent, because if you have somebody who is represented by the governor, is representing the governor general here, and he has to do everything, adherence and obedience has to be for the dictates of Her Majesty. And at the same time, we have a parliament that Her Majesty has all powers to dissolve that parliament. That's why I made it very clear that we didn't gain, 1965, yes, it was a first step, how we could gain independence, and it was a process to get independent. We get independent when it was clear in our constitution. All sovereign power, all executive powers are vested in the hands of the Gambian people. And any government that is elected to serve us must drive the authorities and the powers from the will of the Gambian people. That means you must drive your power and authority from we the voters people. But in 1965, we didn't have that. What we have was the power, the power is derived from Her Majesty. It's not derived from the people of Gambia. And what we do must be in the interest of Her Majesty. Anything contrary that have all power to dissolve those parliaments, and the governor general could have acted in any way around, we could do anything. So it was in 1970 that all those powers were driving from Her Majesty, and Gambia becomes a sovereign republic that was not controlled by any foreign power, but controlled by the majority of the Gambian people that go to the election and vote and put on representative in parliament. And those people, if you have to remove them from parliament, it has to go through a democratic process. It's not that just a few individuals will just come and just this cabinet and the whole cabinet will lose their seat. But in 1965, that has been the argument. So I just counter that argument that even though we have what he calls people representative in parliament, but it's just a formality, but at the end of the day, they are all controlled by Her Majesty, that who can dissolve the parliament at any time at her will, whether it's in the interest of the Gambian people or not, but it has to be done in her interest, and everything, if it is not done in her interest, she just has the power to dissolve our cabinet. So this is why I have made my argument, and I will just push on to say that, we make an end to all these controls, all this internal, external control in 1970 when Gambia became a sovereign republic that owe no obedience or adherence to any other foreign power, but to the will of the Gambian people. And we didn't have anybody who is representing the Queen here. We become an independent state with a constitution under a constitutional law that's give the power back to the Gambian people to determine the way and the manner they will be governed. So this has been my brother's argument. I just have these few points that I will counter there in regards to his argument, in regards to the representative of the people in parliament. For me, that was just a mere formality, right? But at the end of the day, still now the power is vested in Her Majesty, who could have dissolved the parliament at any time at her will. I'm not getting.
Paul, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
Sorry, my mic was I was on mute. Right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Kexx. You had 45 minutes spare, but nevertheless, you managed to put your point across. So now we'll invite our next speaker to rebut the point that was made by the other side, or to reinforce their own position. And it is Melville Roberts. The floor is yours. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much, Pa. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. The motion for the debate is that the Gambia attained independence on the 24th of April, 1970, and not the 18th of February, 1965. Now, my brother, Kexx Sanneh, my fellow debater, has actually made some very interesting points. But again, one thing I have noticed within the discourse of Gambian political landscape is the fact that when laymen interpret laws, they give it an interpretation that only a layman understands. Now, we have to understand that constitutions have what we call amendments to it. So what I will do, first of all, I like to deal with the law because that is what creates the structure that we operate on. So I will refer Kexx to the independence. It's called the Gambia Independence Act of 1964, and this was tabled before Parliament on the 3rd of December 1964. Schedule one of this same Independence Act reads: colonial laws, the Colonial Validity Act of 1865 shall not apply to any law made on or after the appointed day by the legislature of the Gambia. This is the most fundamental legal point that establishes that what my brother Kexx Sanneh was saying was absolutely not accurate, because when the Gambia attained independence in 1965, laws were already readily in place that states that the Colonial Validity Act has no more any legal power or legal validity in the Gambia after 1965. Now, this is what I want to explain. We have what we call a republic. Now, the Gambia became a republic in 1970. But what the scholars or what the proponents that actually argue that the Gambia became independent in 1970 fail to realize is that being a republic is a system of government. A republic is a system of government, and you have various types of republics. You have a people's republic, you have a constitutional republic, and you have a representative republic. Now, in some countries, what is obtained is that you have a fusion of all three. And in the case of the Gambia, we have a fusion of all three. Sorry, there was one that I left out, which is a presidential republic. Now, in the Gambia, we have a fusion of all three, all four. So we have a presidential republic. We have a constitutional republic because we have a constitution, we have a legal order. We have a representative republic because we have people that we elect into our legislature to represent the greater will of the people. And this is what a republic is all about. A republic is a system of government. So in 1970, what happened on the basis of Gambia being an independent state? The leaders of the Gambia decided in consultation with the Gambian people. That is why before Gambia became a republic, the Gambia had to embark on a referendum exercise. And remember, the Gambia embarked on a referendum exercise, I think in 1965 or 66, thereabout, and it failed. It failed to have the required percentage of votes in order for the leaders to act on that referendum question. So in 1970, it was again taken back to the people, again, for the people to decide what sort of government they wanted in place. And in 1970, the people voted that they wanted to have a Republican system of government. In 1965, what was obtained was that the Gambia decided upon themselves to have a monarchical system of government. So what we have in Gambia was a constitutional monarchy. A constitutional monarchy meaning that the Queen had sovereign power. The Queen had sovereign power, but the Queen cannot rule. Now, an example will be Australia. Australia is a constitutional monarchy. The Queen remains the head of state of Australia, but the Queen does not rule Australia. And this is what we obtained in Gambia in 1965. But I want to go further to explain the landscape, the trajectory that actually allowed for this to happen. Now, Gambia became a self-government since 1963. So in 1963, Sadauda was not appointed by the Queen. Sadauda was elected by the Gambian people as prime minister. In 1963, the Gambia had its own legislature. So what happened in 1964, in July of 1964, 3 meetings took place in London. It was called the Gambia Independence Conference. In the Gambia Independence Conference that took place in July of 1964 in England, the Gambia was represented by the Prime Minister at the time, who was Sadauda, and his executive, and the opposition party. In that regard, I'm making reference to PS Njai. Now, when they got to the Independence Conference, and I am referring you to authority, so I'm referring you to the Hansard parliamentary minute that actually captured the events of that meeting. Now, in that independent meeting, the government of the Gambia, comprised of Sadauda and his team and the opposition, decided upon themselves that they wanted the Queen to remain as head of state. So again, am I hearing are you beating?
Yes, your time is up.
Oh, my time is up. Okay, sorry.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Melville. You still have you will have some time to address some of your points in your closing arguments. Unfortunately, your time was up. So thank you very much, Melville, and those of you that are watching, just to remind you again, it looks like we've lost Kexx. Just to remind you again, those of you that are watching, the next segment, we are going to take a very short break. When we come back, the next segment would be the questions and answer session. Those of you that are watching us now, if you have any questions, please, you have 2 options. You can either put them down in the comment section, and we'll pick it up from there to put it to the debaters, or you can text your question to the number that you can see on the screen now. You can either text it direct, or you can send it via WhatsApp, and the question would be put to the debaters. So we'll now take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we'll go to the question and answer session, and wherein I will also bring in our studio guests who are going to form part of that segment. So see you shortly.
Ethnic Isles, ethnicisles.com. Coco Ethnic Isles, the gun bubes. Ethnic Isles, the website bubes. The boutique sibut internet. Kulenko isi di kali jabang. Jamale gosis askani and boki Senegambia. Atundu Africa. Ethnic Isles, amanelen bepa heti bagas. Bidamen kisi yere ak pisu rafet. Bagasi leka yu amul fasong. boole si nag ethnic eyes na fàttewuñ suñ jigéen ñi amal na ay takkaay rafet yoo xam ne bari qualité la def ethnic eyes di leen yëgal ne am nañ delivery service sa Gambia di leen yóbbu seen bagage ba sa bunti kër ñu koy woyee door to door service si anam bu wóor te doo si son waaw kookoy ethnic eyes ba tey ethnic eyes nee na pour jokkoo ak ñoom dem nañ si www.ethniceyes.com ethnic eyes bu ngeen bëggee xam lu wóor jokkoo leen ak suñu liggéeykat yu xarañee ñu tontu leen si nu mu gën a gaawee ethnic eyes.
Thank you. Welcome back. So we are now going to go into the question and answer session, and we'll bring in our studio guests. It looks like there was supposed to be 4 of them, but it looks like we only have 1. But we'll bring Mr. Chongan in to this session. Okay, welcome, Mr. Chongan. So this segment basically is going to be question and answer session. So, Mr. Chongan, do you have any question for any of the speakers? I think your mic is muted.
Sorry, mine was muted. Yes, I have some couple of questions for Kexx. One, what happened in 1965? But in 1965, the Gambia became a member of the United Nations. Only an independent country can become a member of the United Nations. Another issue is, right now you have Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, who are still not republics, who are still the Queen is their nominal leader. Do you want to tell me they're not independent states? And also, another thing that you need to understand, there is things that we call constitutional conventions. Even in the UK, the Queen is nominally the leader, but the Queen cannot give any order or anything. It's the Prime Minister elected by the people who proposes things to the Queen, and the Queen have no choice, but we have to do that. So I think, and also, if we were independent in 1965, then what happened? So these are my 3 questions to Kexx. If you don't understand, I can repeat them again.
Yeah, actually, I only was able to capture only one. So if you can just repeat it, let me just get them down. Okay. The first one is that the Gambia, after 1965, our independence, we became a member of the United Nations. Yeah. The United Nations, only an independent country can become a United Nations member. Number 2, you have Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and some other Caribbean countries who are still not republics. And do you want to tell me that they're independent? Canada can do whatever they want. Australia can do whatever they want. In the UK, the Queen cannot force them anything. For you to understand that, you have to understand what we call constitutional conventions. The Queen can be a nominal leader, but the Queen cannot force anybody. The Queen have to do whatever the prime ministers of those countries want. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for that wonderful questions. First, actually, we have to look at, we cannot use this as a benchmark to determine whether we get independent, because if you look at even what you are saying, the United Nations, one cannot be a member of the United Nations without obtaining independence. And these are the very people that colonized us. So we cannot use our colonizers as a benchmark, because these are very people that are only interested in what they want to achieve in the sub-African regions. So we cannot use that as a benchmark that, okay, they have included us in the United Nations, that means that we are independent. As far as those people are getting what they want, it doesn't matter whether we are there, because for them, it's more of their interest rather than the interest of us. So that cannot be used as a benchmark that because we are part of the United Nations, a member state, or we are a member state to the United Nations, that means that we are an independent state. For me, I will not take that as a benchmark to determine whether we get independent or not, because these are the very people that were our colonial masters, and for them, for their interest, they could accept anything just for their interest. So we will not take that as a benchmark to say that because we were a part of the United Nations, this is why we are there. And your argument in regards of England still having a queen, but he doesn't dictate or control anything that has to be there, and you give examples of other countries, which is different from the context in the Gambia here. Because in my point, I made it very clear to you that the Queen, in the Gambia here, when we in 1965, the Queen still has the power to dissolve even our cabinet, and our constitution was very clear that anything that has to be done, it must be done. The Queen, it must be done in the interest of the Queen. All executive powers are vested in the hands of the Queen, which is different from what you are giving as an example right now. So, the contexts are two different things. Presently, if you talk about England, if you check their laws, it doesn't say that the Queen has the power to dissolve the cabinet at any time. The executive powers are not vested in the Queen. All those things, but this was the instrument that was governing us. That's the constitution that was governing us, and it's very clear in the constitution that the Queen has all those powers, that she can dissolve the cabinet. She has the power, all the executive powers are vested in her, meaning that appointments and other things has to be done to her pleasure. Any person he feels like, and all those people are controlled and dictated by her. So they are working more of a servant to the Queen rather than to servant to the people of the Gambia. So these two contexts are two different things that we could not use as a yardstick to argue that, yes, in 1965, since, England is still having a Queen, but it doesn't make decision. That is different from the context in the Gambia here, because the Queen was here but making decision on behalf of even the parliament here. If there, those will be sitting on her behalf, not on the behalf of the Gambian people. So these are two separate issues that we could not compare to make an argument that yes, we get independent because we have all those things. I don't know whether I missed another question.
Thank you very much, Kexx.
Louie, can I come back? A supplementary question. Kexx is saying all this, the Queen, this, that, and that. Can he base it on law?
You see, my lawyer here is arguing, like he made it very clear during his argument that we the layman who doesn't understand in terms of constitution. When we are making an argument, we make our argument based on not based on the laws or the legality, but what is very clear in our constitution. We look at the documents, we read them. Maybe we will not be very good in terms of interpreting what it means. But what is very clear in our laws, those are the substantive points that we are picking up to say that, like, if somebody tells you that the Queen has the power to dissolve the cabinet, that means that that cabinet is not independent. Like still now, it has been an argument. In terms of Gambia here, like in regards to the president has the power. Like when we were going for that impasse, and people were arguing about this, that the president could have the power to dissolve the cabinet if you want to impeach him, like in form of trying to impeach him if there's any economic crime. And still now, it has been an argument that those clauses, whether they are still in our constitution, that shows you that it doesn't give the power to the people, and as far as people doesn't obtain those powers. So for me, I might not come into terms of a legal term, but what is very clear to me that when we say independent, that means that we dictate and make laws for ourselves without the interference of any foreign power. And by then in 1965, we were controlled by foreign powers in regards to the decisions we make.
Okay, yes, thank you very much,
Kexx. You still have not answered my question. You should have told me that in the 1965 Constitution, it gave power to the Queen to do X, Y, and Z. So you are just...
But I made
so you haven't really answered my question.
Mr. Chongan, can you direct that question to me?
No, I don't need that. I'm asking a question to Kexx. Well, it's very nice to talk about the Queen this, the Queen this. I've given you what I call constitutional conventions. Yeah. But you have not given me the section in the 1965 Constitution of the Gambia where the Queen can dissolve Parliament. I don't agree with you. I doubt it.
No,
you are waffling.
Huh?
I say you are waffling. Give me the section.
No, but when I was making the argument, I give you in the 1965 Constitution, and I directed the audience to Section 29 of the Constitutions, that it was very clear that the Queen the Queen, there shall be a Queen who should appoint a Governor General. So in the 19th, it has already created provisions in the 1965 Constitution that give the power for the Queen to appoint the Governor General. And I went further and I said that when you are even taking an oath of office, you don't take an oath of office, swear it or taking an oath in the name of the Republic of the Gambia, but you take an oath in the name of Her Majesty. That is a provision in the Constitution that you will adhere and you will be serving the Her Majesty instead of serving the Gambian people. And these are provisions that were embedded in our 1965 Constitution, that when you are even taking an oath of office, you will swear and you will be there to represent Her Majesty rather than the people of the Gambia.
Okay, thank you very much, very much, Kexx. I'm not sure. It looks like Mr. Chongan has another question, but what I'll do now is I'll just remind the audience, those of you that are watching, if you have any questions for either Kexx, Louie, or Melville, feel free to write them in the comment section, and I'll pick it up from there. Or you can send them to the number that you can see on the screen right now. You can either text it direct or you can send it via WhatsApp, and then I'll put it to the person that the question is directed to. So, Mr. Chongan, do you have any questions for the other side? In fact, we have one question here. It's from...
Yes, can I come? I have another question for the other side.
Yes, 1 second, Mr. Chongan. What we'll do is, okay, Kexx has been speaking for quite some time. We have a question from Mr. Usman Kaur, who I believe is watching on from YouTube, but we'll leave the question hanging for now. So we'll allow the other side to answer your question, Mr. Chongan, and then we'll come to Mr. Kaur's question, I beg your pardon, which is for Kexx. So, Mr. Chongan, the floor is yours. Yes, Mr. Chongan, you can ask your question to the other side.
Okay, playing the devil's advocate, you guys, why do you think that we were independent in 1965 when the colonial masters still have sway?
It's very simple. Oh, sorry, Louie, can I go on?
Yes, that's fine. That's fine, Melvin. Yeah, yes, you can go on.
Okay, it's very simple. In 1965, according to international law, there are prescribed principles for self-determination and what amounts to a sovereign state. In 1965, the Gambia had capacity to enter into illegal, international, or illegal, or foreign, or external relations. In 1965, Gambia had a legislature. In 1965, Gambia had an elected prime minister. In 1965, Gambia had a high commission representing the interests of the prime minister and of the state of the Gambia in the United Kingdom. In 1965, the Union Jack was lowered in the Gambia and the Gambian flag was hoisted. In 1965, Gambia decided on its own accord, when negotiating the independence conference, that they wanted to enter into an agreement, a bilateral agreement with Senegal, and therefore they signed a Gambia-Senegalo Defense Pact. A country that is not independent cannot, on its own, sign any defense pact without having the authority of the head of state or the sovereign. So that these and every other things that I've listed tells you that in 1965, Gambia was actually determining its own affairs. And to go one step further, in 1965, again, when negotiating the instrument of independence, the Gambia decided to remain and be part of the Commonwealth. These are not things that were forced on Gambia. These were things that the Gambian side, including Sadauda, Gaba Jahumpa, P.S. Njai, and various other individuals negotiated on behalf of the government of the Gambia. And they decided on their own accord that they wanted to remain as part of the Commonwealth, taking into consideration their long history and standing with Great Britain. These things were not forced on Gambia. And what people have to understand is, for you to be a sovereign republic, it has to be premised on an independent state. You cannot go to the people, ask the people to determine what sort of government they have if you don't have independence. If you don't have sovereignty, the Gambia in 1970 could not have held a referendum. They would have gone to seek approval. But when the Gambia sought approval from its own people, they decided that they no longer wanted to have a constitutional monarchy, and they wanted to have a republican system of government. The Gambia they decided this can only happen when a country is independent and can make decisions on their own. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Okay, thank you, Melville. It looks like Mr. Chongan has dropped out.
Yes.
But we'll now, Louie, I'm not sure whether you want to add to anything that Melville has said before we go to Kexx to answer Mr. Kaur's question.
I mean, I think Melvin answered the question brilliantly. He highlighted all the things that I would have perhaps, not able to highlight all. But just one point that I want to emphasize is the Constitution of 64. Sorry. I mean, looking at the Constitution itself, it was quickly breezed. We've brushed it through. We've touched it briefly. But looking at it, interrogated it thoroughly, it stipulates. It basically handed over power to the Gambian Parliament. As I said earlier, the role of the monarchy was very, very minute. It is similar to what we're seeing here in the UK, the Westminster monarch. It's pretty much a ceremonial duty. But the destiny of the Gambia was handed to the hands of to the Gambians. It was handed over to the Parliament. I think that was just one of the things that I wanted to emphasize. Any other thing will be a repetition of what Melvin said earlier. So yes, we can move on to I can hand over everything to you.
And Louie, just finally to just add one more point to what you have just said, I will give reference. I like to give actual reference to events and things to buttress my position. So to Kexx, as per one of my rebuttal grounds, I will give you an instance where in 1991 Australia decided to take part in the Gulf War. They did not need to have the blessing or permission from Great Britain to enter or decide to do whatever they wanted to do with regards to the Gulf War. Gambia did not need the permission of Great Britain to establish relationship with the Soviet Union, which they did. So from between 1965 to 1970, the Gambia entered into so many agreements. If you go back and look at our diplomatic structure, you would understand that between 1965 and 1970, all of these diplomatic missions were established. The Gambia did not need the blessing of the Queen to do that. Sadauda did not need the blessing of the Queen to put up a referendum question to the Gambian people. The only thing that was put to the Gambian people was to determine the type of system of government they want. And again, you have to understand, when Sadauda went to England to negotiate on behalf of the government of the Gambia and on behalf of the people of the Gambia, he was an elected official. An elected official elected by the people to represent their interests in Great Britain. So therefore, when Sadauda spoke, it was the Gambian people that spoke and negotiated the type of government they want, the type of system of government they want, what they had in place. In 1965, Gambia had its own justice department. In 1965, Gambia had its own legislature. In 1965, I mean, every single sector of our institutions of governance were under the authority of the executive in 1965. Therefore, it's just mere semantics and play of words, but Gambia could not have attained independence in 1970. It is not humanly possible.
Okay, thank you, Melville. Just to say we are halfway through this this segment. Just to point out to those of you that are watching that the voting is now open. For those of you who have made up your minds and wish to vote now, the link would be shared in the comment sections of whether you are watching on Twitter, on Facebook, or on YouTube. The link would be shared in the comment section. So just click the link and cast your vote according to how you see fit. If you have not yet made up your mind, that's not a problem. When we get to the end, we'll allocate 5 minutes to allow for people to vote, just in case you have not made up your mind up to that point. So now we'll go to Mr. Kaur's question. I think it was directed to Kexx. And whilst answering that question, Kexx, if you would like to react to anything that had been said in between, feel free to do so. Can we have Mr. Kaur's question, which I believe was a question that was from YouTube, I think. I think Mr. Kaur is watching on YouTube. Is Mr. Producer, can we have Mr. Kaur's question on the screen? I think it was directed to Kexx. Okay, Kexx, the question is here. I'll just read it out. Okay, Mr. Sanneh, is there any difference between independence and sovereignty? If yes, I want to know. My second, that's the first question, whether there's a difference between independence and sovereignty. If yes, he would like to know. And the second question is, what is the source of the points you raised about our country's independence? So he wants to understand the credibility of the sources that you have used to inform your opinion. So I'm sure the producer can leave the question there hanging. And Kexx, the question is for you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. In regards to his first question, whether there is a difference between independence and sovereignty, these are two things that are interlinked. And when you talk about independence, you directly talk about the sovereignty of a state, that you must safeguard your sovereignty. And when we say sovereignty, what does it mean? You could go and determine until you can go into it and look at even the self-determination, whether you were controlled by foreign powers or not. So independence and sovereignty there is no difference totally. Once you talk about independence, you talk about the sovereignty of a state. That you cannot, you can't have independence if you are not sovereign independent. You must have these two things must be linked. You must be independent, which means that you will not have any control outside or inside, but you will be governed by your own laws in this country. And precisely this is my argument. In regards to that, we didn't have these things in 1965, and this is why I said that we didn't have independence, because we controlled, sovereignty was controlled. We only have what we call internal sovereignty, but externally we were controlled by outsiders. So these two things, there is no difference in my point. And here, second question was, where do I get my source of information or my source of point? It is very clear that we have books that have been written in the struggle of Gambia attaining its independence. And if you go look into that and you compare what those independence mean and you make your independent analysis, you will know that in 1965, we were actually not fully independent during my research. I met to understand that we were internally independent. We could do some things on our own, but when you talk about externally, we could not do certain things on our own. And if you go as the argument that was raised by Melville in regards to we have a prime minister who was there, but it was very clear that in the 1965 constitution, when you go there, yes, we have a prime minister that was elected by the Gambian people, but apparently this person doesn't have any say in terms of foreign policies or in terms of foreign policies outside. So he doesn't talks about the foreign policies which was dictated by other people. So even these are some of the arguments that I made to tell you that we are not foreign independent. And he went further to say that we have the judicial system and other things. But it is very clear in the 1965 constitution that all those executive powers are vested in the hands of Her Majesty. So even though we have those things, are just formality that we have those independent institutions that could govern. We have a judicial system, we have the executive, we have the legislature. But at the end of the day, all those executive powers reside in the hands of Her Majesty. And if you look at the judicial system, you talk about the Ministry of Justice, who is under the executive control of the president, who is under the executive. And the law is telling you that all executive powers are vested in Her Majesty. So where's the independence in terms of making decisions? So that has been my argument in regards to the whole. It was a process, and we started the entire process from 1965, which I didn't argue that the process of gaining a fully independent start in 1965, and we were able to achieve some form of independence, but we become fully independent as a sovereign state that owe no obedience or adherence to any other foreign power came in 1975. 1970, on the 24th April, that we owe no obedience or adherence to any power, but to the Gambian people. So we were not controlled by any other party. But the process started 1965, and we could argue, yes, we have, but what we have, I could attain it as, we have what we call internal independence, but still now outside we were controlled and everything. And Melville was arguing that the Saudada will go there, he will go on behalf of, in consultation most of the time when he is going outside in the name of the Gambian people, it is in consultation with Her Majesty, whether it is open to the people, but it is evident that it's in consultation with Her Majesty, since he controls the executive power, and you cannot do any executive decision without the consultation of those people. So there are consultations which might not be open to the people, but we know that definitely there was a control, there is a form of control.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sanneh. I think, Mr. Chongan, do you have any questions for?
Pa, are we not entitled to rebuttal?
Well, it's 1 second. Let me just find out whether Mr. Chongan has a question. If Mr. Chongan doesn't have a question, we can just have a free flow discussion. If you have points to make, you can put them, and if Kexx wants to respond, Kexx can respond.
Yeah, Louie, I don't want to make it to and fro, so I'll leave it to flow. So no questions.
Okay, Melville, there's a point that you wanted to make, yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to put out something, and I think it's a very I don't want to use false, but it's an untrue narrative. There is no point after 1965 that any of the executive members had any decision either to enter into foreign relations with any other state that they had to seek the blessing and or permission from the Her Majesty's government. That is not true. That did not happen. And I want Kexx to cite any of our foreign relations. I'll give you an example. On the 17th of July, 1965, the Gambia established diplomatic relationship with Russia. And at that time, Russia had no diplomatic relations with the United Kingdom. Did the Queen give her blessings for Gambia to do that? No. The Gambia established so many foreign diplomatic relations with other countries that did not even have diplomatic ties with the United Kingdom. So no, Gambia had absolute capacity to enter into foreign relations, and there is no law that said that the legislature or any laws passed in the legislature had to have the blessing of the Queen. That is inaccurate. So I think it is imperative that we get that out there, forthwith, that this is false. That did not happen. Because if you look at the Independence Act of 1965, it basically states that. And in fact, I want to make reference to what Kexx said with regards to the Governor General, and I think this brings a lot of confusion. Because what happened in 1965, remember, the Gambian delegation negotiated because they wanted to remain part of a constitutional monarchy. Because at the time, it was a whole psychological idea that being part of the constitutional monarchy would give Gambia some sort of clout. Gambia did not just want to break away and civilize, automatically from Great Britain, because they had been colonized for so long. But what is most important is when we talk about the legality of the relationship that existed between the United Kingdom and the Gambia. The legal framework that provided for the legality of that relationship was the Colonial Validity Act. Now, what the Independence Bill stated, foremost, on the first schedule, is that the Colonial Validity Act ceased to exist in 1965 when Gambia became independent. So there was no legal structure, no legal framework to even govern the relationship between the United Kingdom and the Gambia, because that Validity Act that created the legality of the relationship that the Gambia has enjoyed as a colony with the United Kingdom ceased to exist at that point. Now, the Gambian side negotiated that they wanted the Queen to remain as head of state. But this was the Queen remaining as head of state with ceremonial powers. But the Queen had no executive and no legislative powers over the Gambia. And this was established foremost on Section 1 of the Constitutional Order, the Gambia Independence Constitutional Order. And I refer Kexx to that. And secondly, I want to create an example to let Kexx understand that when Yahya Jammeh decided that the Gambia would no more be a part of the Commonwealth, that was a sovereign state making a decision that the Gambia would not be part of the Commonwealth. Now, Jammeh did whatever he did through the legal process to take away the Gambia from the Commonwealth. Now, that same decision, you flip it over, is what the Gambian counterpart decided at the point of independence. They decided that they wanted to be part of the Commonwealth. They decided that they wanted the Queen to remain head of state. And when Sadauda decided that for all intents and purposes, they did not want to do that anymore, for whatever reason they had, they decided to go back to the people. Because remember, they were a representative of the people in 1965 or 1964 of July when they made the negotiations with London. So they had to go back to the people through a referendum process. So how can Kexx tell me or convince our audience that the Queen had absolute over the executive, over the legislature? When a referendum was passed, the Gambians decided, they took their own affairs and decided, we don't want this system of government anymore. What we want is a Republican system of government. What we want is a presidential system of government. What we want is a constitutional republic. And they fused all of this. Sadauda became a president. We had the legislature. We had a constitution, and bingo. But that was a system of government. It was not independent. Independence was being able to make that decision. Because if Gambia was not independent, Gambia would not be able to determine that they want a particular type of a system of government. But because they were independent, and because there was a legal framework to provide for that independence, they were able to determine among themselves that they wanted a change of a system of government, and that was what happened on the 24th of April, 1970.
Okay, thank you very much, Melville. Just to say, we have two more minutes to go. I'm not sure if Kexx, do you want to respond to anything that have been said so far?
Yeah, actually, I just wanna go back to what we call the Independent Act. In 1964, there was an act that was made, and it made it official that after on the 18th of February 1965, Her Majesty of UK shall not have any responsibility in the way the Gambia will be governed. But if you go back to 1965 Constitution, it is very clear there that the executive power is vested in Her Majesty. And there was an act in 1965, but just look at that, whether there is not a contradiction in regards to, because are the government tools. They are the guiding tools in how a government is governed. And if you go to this 1965 Constitution, it was clearly stated there that all executive powers are vested in Her Majesty. But if you check at the 1965 Independent Act, it says that after 18 February 1965, the Queen of England, Her Majesty, shall not have any responsibility in terms of the way Gambia will be governed. But the same 1965 Constitution is telling you that all executive powers were vested in Her Majesty. And it went forward to tell you that it will be given a hard agency to empower and put a representative in Parliament. You know, so, and it went forward to give you the power of Her Majesty to even dissolve that cabinet. So you could see the contradiction here. So there was still a power that was given to Her Majesty in a form of controlling the way and the manner this country will be governed. So we could not say that, we cannot say that we are independent, but still now we are subjected to a control and direction by an individual. Our very constitution that was governing us in 1965. All this came into end in 1970, when we have the 1970 Constitution, the Republican Constitution. And these are the governing documents that governs the manner and the way the country will be governed. And if that constitution says anything contrary to that, means that there is a violation of the constitution, and which is tantamount to treason if anybody violated those things. And those constitutions have power to a foreign power. to control and dictate the way and the manner the country will be governed. So we thought that we were independent, and thought that we didn't have control. When the constitution is speaking the language that we were controlled by somebody who is outside, even have to say have a representative element in terms of how decisions will be made. It went further to give him the power to even dissolve that entire cabinet that was elected by the Gambian people in the 1965 constitution. So where is the independence? All this came into, it was abrogated or stopped in 1970 when we had the 1970 constitution that gives the power back to the Gambian people to determine the way, the manner they will be governed. So it was just a mere of just having those like laws when we could not adhere to it because we were having a control outside. So we just have the laws there, but we were not adhering to it because there is a benchmark or there is a laydowns that give the power to that individual to control the way and the manner we will be governed. And it went further to give him all those powers that I had here. So it was just more of just a word like we were, actually we were because we were controlled. But all this came into being and in 1970. And I have made it very clear, and I give you evidence why I said that we have we gained independence. But it was a process. And in 1965, there were so many struggles. Until 1970, when we get fully independent, we owe no obedience adherent to any other foreign power. As far as we owe obedience and adherent to any foreign power, we were not independent. Because we owe obedience and adherent to a foreign power. And until that come to an end, we will not. That's why when we work, we still have Queen in England, but it doesn't, because he doesn't have any, it was just a ceremonial, it doesn't have any voice in terms of the way and the manner it will be governed. But in 1965, we still have somebody who have the voice and the control. He dictates how we are. We have adherence, we have to obey to her, in way our country will be governed. So all those examples that these people give, that they still have the Queen has there, but still now they were independent. It doesn't have any. But in the Gambia, we have somebody who has a say in the way, in the manner our country will be governed. Until 1970, this comes to an end. So the entire process from 1965 was a process. Until 1970, we get fully independent, that we owe no obedience adherent to any other foreign power.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kexx. Just to say that
do we have a right of response?
We have come to the end of this this segment. Unfortunately, it was meant to run for half an hour.
Kexx is absolutely confusing.
Yes, but okay. What will do, Melville? What
it is so important that I say this. He's actually confusing. He's confusing the Independence Act and the 1965 Constitution. Because remember, are you saying something?
Yeah, let me come. What I'm saying is, I'm just conscious of the time, because this was supposed to run for half an hour. I've actually it has actually run for 35 minutes. So what I can do is I'll add a minute for everybody else when we come to the closing arguments. Instead of 2 minutes, you can have 3 each, you and Louie, and Kexx can have 6. Then you may be able to add in your additional points.
Absolutely.
In your closing remarks. But just before we proceed, I just 2 things. Those of you that are watching, just to say, if you are watching and you do not vote, it would not really help the side that you are supporting. If you want to help the side that you are supporting, you have to vote so that they can win. The link has been shared online. If you want to vote, just click the link. It's one straight question. Just select your answer and then click vote or next, and your vote would be registered. Just to say, the link is shared in the comment sections, whether you are watching on YouTube, on Facebook, or on Twitter. The link to vote has been shared, and for you to help the side of the debate that convinces you tonight, or the side of the debate that you have all along supported, you need to really vote for them. So before we are just about to take one more very short break, and when we come back, the speakers will make their closing arguments, and in making their closing argument, they would not just I would imagine they would not just be wrapping up their arguments, but they would also be pitching out for you to vote in favor of side which or in favor of the position that they advance tonight. So, but before that, I'll just highlight that we have another interesting debate next month, and I'm not sure whether we can share the details of that debate now. As you can see that the details of the debate are now on the screen. This one is for next month. And the topic for that one is, does the Gambia need an army? And the date is yet to be confirmed, but it's going to be next month in March. The date is yet to be confirmed and the time. And the participants for that debate are going to be those who are going to be advancing the case that yes, the Gambia needs an army would be ex-Assistant Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Chongan, who is one of our who is actually our only studio guest tonight. He's going to be among the participants for our next debate. Yes.
I'm not an ex. I'm a retired Assistant Inspector General. There's a difference in that. Okay? Make sure you. That's
okay. I will.
Clarify that. Don't say ex. I'm a retired.
I will certainly rectify that that error. You are right. It should read retired and not ex. That is my mistake. So just to say yes, retired Assistant Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Chongan and Mr. Suleiman Ben Suare. The two of them are going to be advancing the case that yes, the Gambia needs an army, and the two that are going to be advancing the position that the Gambia does not need an army would be Mr. Babu Abdullahi Job, who is the proprietor for Diasporium Online Radio, and Dr. Lamin K. Jane, who is also the proprietor of the Better Future Productions, which is also another online platform. So this is the details for our next debate, which is in March. But the date and everything, once confirmed, the flyer would come out, and Gunjur Online or GOTV would share that on their page for your information. And yes, just to say that now we are going to take a very short break, and when we come back, our able participants would make their closing remarks, and then we can move on to announce the results and then wrap up today's debate.
Louie.
Yes, just before we go, yes, Mr. Chongan, yes.
Yeah, I think I've done my duty, so I can sign off because you guys delayed, and my daughter wants to take over her room. So
yeah, that's fine. We are taking a commercial.
Yeah, good luck to all of you and all the best. Nice to meet Melvin and Kexx,
nice meeting you too.
Sambou the soldier and everybody. Okay, all the best. Bye bye.
All right, have a good night, Mr. Chongan. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chongan. Okay.
A proper healthcare system, that's what I expect. Now it's here, go here, that's what I expect. New control borders, that's what I expect. Cancel flights, set airport, me, that's what I expect. Nah legi ñun ñep ñu ci njaaxare ndaxte feebar bi aka gaawa waa ale. So stay at home, asa bopp ak ñi la jege oyto ndeku te def lu digle noonu leen ko mun a xeexee. They know it's hard moo tax njëgi lu ne di gën a cher. Lu doon jar benn ñu def ko 10 like they don't care. The poor crying ku si am nang leen jàppale te yàlla na li jeex ba bés ñëw ñu du ko nettali. Wash your hands for your sake, cause our lives are at stake. Nañ aar xale yi, avoid marché bi, tasaare campé yi ba duñ gis saat ndaje fi pour ñu daan corona. Il faut ñu toppa charte yi.
Korole naata ka dunia kumbondi akile tubake wole munyantoti kambulu kusafondola nyobulu dozetala nibe totola Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds or more with soap and water, alcohol-based hand rub or more. Cover your nose and mouth with Flex elbow when you cough or sneeze. Na dore chio nakfagarun from this killing disease. Yala bana lulu yaga na yo balanga judu. Nekul ne lip ngai bai chi lokhom yo wit nanga mwetu. Please take this COVID-19 seriously and limit movement. Stay at home, protect yourself and stop the visitations.
Banyana link, banyana bikira. Dabule njaka mobu patu makachilia. Sicilia ni Lilian. Ndanyowa ninya sakule mamena chibampulia. Nyowa ninya mcho kula ni mcho mwina tiji. Pumak piring. Channel the deaf to go to lole. Could call it 1025.
Hey papa nyi ayenyi corona bandi manje. Nyowa ninya nutefan kata walaban beno. Corona bibu nora ni banyan. Nasembati manyan. Jurari banyan, swear to God, yeah, dinner cool. My people dinner cool. God juradun, ay, corona go far, hey, Orole nataka dunia kumbondi. Akili tubake, ole munyantolti. Kambulu puta fonola, nyobulu no zetala.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back to the final segment of tonight's debate. Just to say that once the final closing arguments have been made, we'll allow 5 minutes and then the voting will close and then we'll announce the results. So just like I said, if you are watching, or to those of you that are watching, unless you vote, you will not help the side of the debate that that you support. So to help them to win, you have to vote. So the link has been shared in the comment sections. So please click it and make sure you vote. So we'll now go straight into the closing arguments. Just like I said, Kexx, you have a maximum of 6 minutes, and Louie and Melville each, you have 3 minutes each to make your closing argument. So we'll start with Kexx. Or what we'll do to make it fair, we can start with one of you, Louie or Melville, can make your closing argument first. Kexx will come in, then the next person comes in at the end. If Louie or Melville, either of you, one of you could make a start.
Okay, cheers, Pa. I'll go first, if you don't mind, Melville.
That's fine. That's all right.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it's quite interesting. I've been following it, slightly agitated, wanting to jump into the conversation. But yes, you've been doing you're doing a good job, Melvin, for trying to debunk some of the allegations or rhetorics that Kexx is coming up with. And I'm quite scared, how passionate some of these advances are being put forward. And I think it is quite dangerous. It is quite dangerous that I'm afraid some of the pronouncements being put forward are, in my opinion, baseless. I mean, yes, you've talked about member states being welcomed into the United Nations, which I think there was an argument that was put forward that you have to be a member state in order to be accepted into the United Nations. But your counter argument was that could be compromised due to the interest of the imperialist. And I think that is a very flawed position, really. I mean, when the United Nations was created in 1945, it was pretty much created in order to avoid what has happened as in World War II, not to have a replicate of that. And through my research, as a prerequisite, you have to be a member state in order to be accepted into the United Nations. And when the Gambia joined the United Nations, it was I think in 21st of Feb, sometime. Well, I think it was in 1965. It was definitely in 1965, September 1965, something of that sort. And you have to be. If it wasn't a member state in the first place, Gambia wouldn't be allowed into the United Nations. And the other thing that you've also highlighted is the role that the monarch has in the political space of the Gambia in 1965. That it was a very instrumental. She has a very instrumental role, as in she has the powers to debunk or to dissolve Parliament. It will be quite interesting, though. I mean, I think this is for my own education, really, to see where in the Constitution has that been articulated. Where in the Constitution has that been? All that I'm going through my research. All that I can see is that the Governor General was there in representing the monarch, and his role was just pretty much ceremonial. And I cited the system that we have in the UK, the Westminster model. Is the same thing. Power lies on the people. The people elect their officials into Parliament, and the people or the officials take decisions that represent or reflect the wishes of the nation, of the people, and those wishes or decisions are presented to the monarch. But there is nowhere that I've come across that the Queen has the powers to overrule what Parliament has decided. I think it's just a formality and the system of governance that is in place. And I've also cited other civilizations. We've looked at Canada, we've looked at Belize, Jamaica. It is very, very, I don't know. I don't know what would be the justification for one to say those countries are not sovereign states. I think the system that we have in Gambia is just the Westminster model. As I said, I've mentioned Portugal, for instance. We've looked at France. France could be another example. Systems of governance, I think it's just their post-colonial system of governance, the way that they've adopted living those countries. So yes, the proposition that the Gambia hasn't retained or regained her political independence in 1965, instead in 1970, I think it is fundamentally flawed. And the ideas or the position that you've adopted, if you can please help identify some of the justifications that you've highlighted. Can you link that or cite where in the Constitution one can find that? I think that is purely for my own education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louis. We'll now have Kexx. The floor is yours. You have 6 minutes. Well, a maximum of 6 minutes. Is up to you when you want to stop, but the maximum time is 6 minutes. The floor is yours for your closing arguments.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it has been an educative one. I thank all my brothers here. We learn two things from each other. But still now, I maintain my position that Gambia attained independence in 1970, on 24th April 1970, and I make this argument based on the research that I have done in regards to what does it mean for one to obtain independence. And in 1970 was when Gambia became a sovereign independent republic, and it was in that day that we were attaining what we call the constitutional right to self-determination and sovereignty, the genuine independence. In 1965, as I argue, was the time what we gained is called internal self-governance under a constitutional monarchy. But we have what we call the Governor General, who we all owe this allegiance and obedience and adherence to, and who was represented by Her Majesty. So for me, where does the independence lies when we owe allegiance and obedience to foreign power? It should be clear to every Gambians that in 1965 the country that we have was a Gambia under a constitutional monarchy in 1965, and not we didn't attain the full sovereign existence as a people of the Gambia. The people of the Gambia were still subject and controlled. They were not sovereign citizens of the Gambia in 1965. Because we have the Governor General who has all the authority to appoint what we call the constitutional boundaries commissions for the purpose of an election for a representative in our parliament. So, and the Governor General was appointed by Her Majesty, who controls and dictates what he or she has to do on behalf of Her Majesty. The Governor General went further to have the power to assert laws on behalf of Her Majesty, make laws, for us, on behalf of Her Majesty. So for me, and in short, it tells you that the executive power is vested in Her Majesty under the 1965 Constitution. So it was after the referendum in 1970 that the Gambia became an independent sovereign republic on the 24th of April. And it was on that day that we have what we call the cabinet, and we have the parliaments where required by the constitution of the Gambia to owe allegiance and adherence to no other foreign power but to the Gambian people as a nation. And the sovereignty of the Gambia was vested in the hands of the Gambian people, where we preside, we consolidate, we make decisions in terms of our integrated independence, in terms of our political independence, in terms of self-determining, the freedom to determine our economic, our social and political development of the country. But in 1965, these were not things that we have attained as a people. Gambia were required by law after 1970 that we own the country and we are the rulers of this country. We owe no obedience or adherence to anybody, and the laws are not asserted by any other foreign power, but asserted by we the Gambian people. And we have we have the mandate to exercise our own.
It looks like we have lost Kexx. Kexx, if you're still there, you can just disable your video. That should help improve the quality of your audio. Right. Okay. What we can do now is, because Kexx was making he was closing arguments, I'm not sure whether it may not be practical to move on to Melville and then come back to Kexx for him to complete. He was a little over halfway. We'll give him some time to see if he's going to come back. To those of you watching, just like I have said, the side of the debate that you're supporting, if you want to help them to win, you have to vote. Kexx is back. Kexx, carry on.
So yeah, like again. So for me, therefore, it was in 1970 that we made the beginning of Gambian as a sovereign republic, sovereign independent state, and we become independent. We owe no adherence or obedience to anybody, and this make every Gambian equal owners of the country, and we owe no adherence to anyone. The destiny of the Gambia and the right to enjoy the liberty and the service of the country lies in the hands of the Gambian people, no other foreign power. So I will still maintain my argument that, in 1965 was a process for us to gain independence, but we become independent as a sovereign state in 1970. And all the viewers, I will tell them to do most research in terms of what those independent mean and what was Gambia in 1965 compared to what was Gambia in 1970 when we attained their independence as a state, and look at the manner and the way we were governed and compound them and compare them and see whether we were actually independent in 1965 or not. For me, my argument still maintains that we were independent in 1965 when we owe no adherence or obedience to any other foreign power. But the decision of the Gambia and the way and the manner we will run, how our economic will be run, how our social, economic, the politically, and everything will be run was solely in the hands of the Gambian people. No other foreign power has control or dictates how our country should be governed. And this has been my position, and I'm telling the viewers to look and make more research, and they will understand the context that I'm talking from.
Okay, thank you very much, Kexx. You had a minute to spare, but nevertheless, I think you've made all the points that you needed to make. There, without further delay, I'll move on to the last speaker for tonight. Melville, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. Again, Kexx had to do a lot of repetition of his initial stance or argument with regards to control and everything like that. But he's not been able to cite any legal authority, and he's not been able to give us any instance where between 1965 and 1970 that the Gambia had to seek the permission of the Queen to enter into diplomatic relations or to enter into any bilateral or multilateral agreements. He has not been able to explain to me and to the viewers why Gambia would enter into diplomatic relations with Russia, when at that time England had no diplomatic relationship with Russia. So a lot of things that Kexx cannot pretty much articulate. And of course, I would have loved to ask Kexx a question, and that would be, when did Gambia actually become a democratic state? Because I know Kexx is actually confusing the systems of government and confusing the ideology of independence and the meaning of independence and what independence truly means. I as for example, at the age of 21 or 18, I become an adult. I decide to stay in my parents' house. Does that mean I am not an adult? Does that mean I have not come of age? No, it does not. It is a matter of choice. And this is the easiest kind of example I can give. So I decide to stay within my parents. I want to stay in my parents' house, but it does not mean I'm not of age. It does not mean I did not become an adult. But finally, I just want to close, because I like to cite authority, and that's why the basis of my arguments have been pretty much on the independence order. I've given reference to the minutes of the negotiations that ensued before the independence order. And finally, I will close with just reading, and I will refer the viewers to hansa.parliament.uk. And these are the minutes of the proceedings that took place on the 3rd of December 1964 in Westminster, the UK's Parliament, where the Bill of Independence was tabled. And I'll read. It says, further, relations between Senegal and the Gambia are, of course, matters for their free, independent government. This is the person who is tabling the Bill of Independence in Parliament and stating that further relations between Senegal and the Gambia are, of course, matters for their free, independent governments. I think it would be reasonable to say that we would hope that their economies may increasingly work together over the years, and that they may see the good sense of using this great waterway for the benefit of both. In July of this year, that is in 1964, there was a report from the United Nations team which investigated the workings of the two governments, meaning the Gambia and Senegal. As a result, there was a treaty of agreement established between the Gambia and Senegal. Again, this was in 1964, providing for cooperation in foreign affairs, defense, and joint committees that has to be set up to promote cooperation between the two states. It further says the agreements are to be signed after independence. We welcome the decision, and it is the obvious way that things ought to go.
Thank you very much, Melville.
Wow, my 3 minutes was quick.
Yes. Thank you very much, Melville. So now that brings us to the end of everything that the speakers and the participants had to present. So now what we'll do is we will take a 5 minutes break, and the first 3 minutes of that 5 minutes would be to allow those of you who have not yet voted to vote. After 3 minutes, the voting would close, and the results would be announced. So we will come back in 5 minutes to announce the results.
With the risks associated with land transactions in an unregulated property industry in the Gambia, Horizon Solutions offers a one-stop quality assurance service suited to every buyer's need. This is Ali. He paid hundreds of thousands for a plot of land, but received no title and no land. Ali's friend John also paid lots of money to an agent who no longer picks up his calls, and he now risks losing all his investment. Salima, having learnt of her friend's experience, is put off buying land altogether. These friends' experiences are more common than society appreciates. Horizon aims to help you avoid being another victim. Contact us today at horizongambia@gmail.com, WhatsApp 220-264-5680, or visit us at Manjai Kunda Road, opposite Atlas Filling Station.
Okay, welcome back to our debate night, which is the second one. Just to say that we were supposed to be announcing the results now, but if we take a short break, the voting has now closed. So for anyone who has not yet voted, unfortunately, that window is closed. So we'll now tabulate the results and have them shared on the screen and whilst the announcement takes place. So if we can take a very short break for no more than 3 minutes, then we'll come back and the results should be available by that time.
Live in one.
A proper healthcare system, that's what I expect. Now I say go here, that's what I expect. New control borders, that's what I expect. Cancel flights, stage airport me, that's what I expect. Nah legi ñun ñep ñu ci njaaxare ndaxte feebar bi ak gaawa waa ale. So stay at home asa bopp ak ñi la jege oyto ndeku te def lu digle noonu leen ko mun a xeexee. They know it's hard moo tax njëgi lu ne di gën a cher. Lu doon jar benn ñu def ko 10 like they don't care. The poor crying ku si am nang leen jàppale te yàlla na li jeex ba bés ñëw ñu du ko nettali. Wash your hands for your sake, cause our lives are at stake. Nañ aar xale yi avoid marché bi tasaare campé yi ba duñ gis saat ndaje fi pour ñu daan corona il faut ñu toppa charte yi.
Korole nataka dunia kumbondi akile tubake wole munyantoti kambulu kusafondola nyobulu dozetala nibe totola dukareda mura.
Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds or more with soap and water, alcohol-based hand rub or more. Cover your nose and mouth with Kexx elbow when you cough or sneeze. Nadore chio nakfagarun from this killing disease. Yala bana lulu yaga yo balanga judu. Nekune lip ngai bai chi lokhom yo with nanga mwetu. Please take this COVID-19 seriously and limit movement. Stay at home, protect yourself and stop the visitations.
Banyana link, banyana bikira. Dabule njaka mobu pato makachilia Sicilia ni Lilian Ndanyowa ninya sakule mamenda chibampulia Nyowa ninya mcho kula ni mcho mwina tiji Pumak piring Channel the deaf to go to lole Could call it 1025
Ay papenji ayenji corona bandi manje Nyowa ninya nutefon kata wala van beno Corona bibu nora ni banyana Sembati manyana Jurari banyan, swear to God, if dinner cool, my people dinner cool, God juradun, ay, corona go far, ay, korole nataka dunia kumbondi, akile tubake, wole munyantolti, kambulu kusafonola, nyobulu dozetala. Betotola dukareda mura kana nyutora.
Welcome back. I think we've now finalized the results. So we'll announce the results, and then after we announce the results, we'll give the participants to react on the results, and then after that we'll wrap up. So if we can have the results on the screen, I think they should come up shortly. Right. It looks like there's a bit of a hold up with getting the results on the screen. But what I will do is I will announce the results. Whilst I'm announcing the results, if at all the producer is able to line them up, at any point the producer can just bring them to the screen. So I announce the results at the start of the debate. When we started the baseline, which was the preliminary results that we had for the motion, which is Kexx, had a 50% vote for him or for his side, and against the motion we had 30%, and undecided were 20%. And this was the preliminary vote at the start, which was the baseline. So after the debate, the final results are for the motion, 26.7%. Against the motion, 73.3%. And there was nobody undecided. And that brings the final results to for the motion minus 23.3% from where you started. And against the motion, you had a plus 43.3% from the position where you started. So those are the results. I believe they are now on the screen. You can see now the actual pie chart of the votes which were cast online. So shortly, the table should come up with tabulated the results and work out the difference between the preliminary results and the substantive results, which then comes up with the final figure to work out who the winner is. So I believe that table should come to this should come up on the screen shortly. But whilst we await that, Louie, you are still on, and Kexx, you are still on. If you would like to react to the results and congratulate each other, and then we can wrap up.
Okay. Cheers. No, I mean, I think yes, this is quite good, and just to share Kexx views at his during his preamble. Yes, it is more or less a sharing of ideas, and I think it is quite healthy that we have such a culture. It's a competition of ideas, and not necessarily Gambia, but I think it is a good thing for the diaspora or Africans in general, to be having such conversations. I think this is one of the platforms or one of the ways in which we can advance the cause of what our founding fathers were actually vying for, a Pan-African, a socialist Pan-African Africa, and thank you very much, Kexx, for putting up a strong fight, a strong defense, and I hope that the points that were advanced here are not points that are strongly held by you. It is just for the sake of the debate, but nonetheless, the principle or the concept, the concept of having such such a platform where we can exchange ideas and things like that. I think it is a very good thing, and I thank you for embracing that. And to you, the people that are following us online, again, thank you for sparing us with your time. It is a Sunday, preparing for work tomorrow. So yes, thank you very much for following us online, and yes, thank you very much, Pa, as well, for coming up, you and your team for coming up with such an idea. I think, as I said earlier, this is something that we definitely need. Especially in the case of Gambia, at the point where we are at the moment, we need a vibrant, a strong youth base. A population that is always keeping an eye to the executive. I mean, that is the only way that we can nurture our democracy, that we can strengthen our democracy. The people that we elect, we are there in some cases play the role of the Messiah, for instance, constantly throwing stones on them. I think sometimes it is necessary really to have them in place. And Kexx, yes, thank you very much for honoring the invitation. And yes, I hope we'll have more of this as time goes on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Louis. Yes, Kexx, you can react to the results and you can wrap up, and then after that, I just give closing remarks, and we can call it a day, or we can call it a night.
Yeah, thank you very much once again. In regards to the results, this is the beauty of democracy. We might agree and disagree, and we have to respect the democratic process. And people have listened to both of us, and they were convinced by the argument from the other side, and they voted, which I respect. And I said, this is the beauty of democracy. It has been a learning point that I have learned 2 or 3 things from. Maybe I might have a different view, but today when I sit down, compare what has been, or go through the video, maybe I don't have chance, I might be convinced, or still now I may still maintain my position. But this is the beauty of democracy. We must exchange ideas, since nobody has a monopoly of knowledge, but we all learn each other so that we can save the future of this country. And I think it is the right time for we, the young people, to take the mantle of leadership in the way and the manner our country will be governed. And we must be part of the decision making. We must be part of the dinner table, to make those decisions. But if we allow these people to make the decision for us, they are making the decisions that will haunt us in the future, and we own the future. So that means that we must be in the dinner table to discuss issues affecting us so that we will save the future of this country. And for Louie, Melville, and you, the Gunjuru Online TV, it is good to have this platform, and I think we will have more of this, for all of us to learn and save the future of this country. It has been a great exchange. I will not even use the word debate, but a great exchange of ideas or knowledge in terms of, what does it mean for one to attain independence and what we are, because this has been an argument for a quite long time, and we have vast majority of the Gambians that believe that we gained independence in 1965, whilst vast majority of the Gambians believe that we gained independence in 1970, and unless we have such fora, or such platform, to discuss the issue, so that at least we might change each other's position in regards to have at least a consensus or an agreement in regards to what does it mean for independent, and why do we say that we have independence in 1965. And I said thank you to all the listeners who took their time, to sit here and listen to us. It has been a very good exchange, and I thank all of you, the team, the entire team, those behind the scene and those in the scene, and said it is a good time having you people here, and I have learned 2 or 3 things from you people, and I hope this will continue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Kexx. I think Melville is now back on. Yes, Melville, your closing remarks that I wrap.
Well, I was back on for a long time, and you ignored me.
I don't have any controls here. The producer is in charge.
No, I just wanted to say, man, it was a great debate. I enjoyed it. I would have wished that Kexx partner would have been around, so that it could have been, but I mean, Kexx did his best. I mean, he held his stuff. Good one, Kexx. We will. This is one down. We have another one, right, Kexx?
Sure.
We have another one. But it was good. It was good. It was really good. I mean, I think this is like Kexx said, we are now in a situation where we battle ideas. It's not about personalities or anything. We talk, we all learn from each other. I learn every day. I learned a lot from what Kexx said. I learned a lot from what Louie said as well. So we all learn, and then at the end of the day, we all get better equipped with especially in this regard with our politics and our history from where we came. So it was a brilliant debate, but I think I'm going to convince Kexx. I'm gonna get Kexx. I'm gonna send him all the resources. I'm gonna send him the minutes of the Independence Conference when his own Sadauda that probably his grandfather elected and voted into office decided that they wanted to be part of a constitutional monarchy. So I'll send everything to Kexx. So Kexx knows that it was the Gambian people, by virtue of their representative, that decided they wanted to be part of a constitutional monarchy. That's the type of government they wanted at our time. And in 1970, they decided, no, in 1965, I think, 66, they went to referendum to change that. The people said, no, we are not ready. We don't want that yet. We still want to be a constitutional monarchy. And finally, in 1970, they did the referendum and they decided at that time, yes, we want to be like Kexx. We want to follow the footsteps of Kexx, and then now we want to be a Republican system. We want to have a Republican system of government. So it was always determined by the people, and that's what I wanted to come across, so that Kexx knows that at all times the people decided. The only difference is in 1965 or 1964 rather, it was done by the representative of the people, and in 1965 through a referendum, or in 1970 through a referendum, the people decided. But at all times, it was the people that decided. So I just wanted Kexx to know that, and to know that a Republican system of government is a system, and it does not amount to independence. It's just the type of government that we have. For example, Russia is a republic. Sorry,
you've won the debate already.
Not Korea. North Korea is the Republic of North Korea, but they are not a democratic state. You understand? You have Russia, it's the Republic of Russia, or they are a republic, but they are not a democratic. They are not a democratic state. So you have to understand that this is just a system of government. Whilst democracy is an ideology, being independent is a process. And what we decided in 1970 was just basically to choose the type of system of government that we wanted. But thanks, Kexx. I'll convince you after.
Thanks for that information. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you.
And I will look
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kexx. Thank you, Louie and Melville and Chonga and who was left. Thank you very much for making this debate possible. Thank you very much to Gunjur Online TV also, and thank you very much to Mr. Jame, who is backstage doing the producing. So, to all of you who spent your time watching this debate tonight and who have taken part in the voting, whether it is the preliminary voting or whether it was the final voting, and those of you who asked questions, thank you very much for taking part. And I hope you would have learned a thing or two from the discussions that happened tonight. There were strong arguments on both sides. I have certainly learned quite a bit from both sides, and this is the essence of hosting programs like this, is just so that we can learn from each other, and that's the only way that we can develop our knowledge and develop our understanding of things that are important to us as a country. So on that note, I would say thank you very much and good night.
With the risks associated with land transactions in an unregulated property industry in the Gambia, Horizon Solutions offers a one-stop quality assurance service suited to every buyer's need. This is Ali. He paid hundreds of thousands for a plot of land, but received no title and no land. Ali's friend John also paid lots of money to an agent who no longer picks up his calls, and he now risks losing all his investment. Salima, having learnt of her friend's experience, is put off buying land altogether. These friends' experiences are more common than society appreciates. Horizon aims to help you avoid being another victim. Contact us today at horizongambia@gmail.com, WhatsApp 220-264-5680, or visit us at Manjai Kunda Road, opposite Atlas Filling Station.
Ethnic Isles, ethnicisles.com. Ethnic Isles is a newly launched online store brought to you by Kadijaba to the Senegambian African community. Ethnic Isles will sell all your ethnic products at a reasonable price, just under one click. Visit our friendly online site where you can buy products from clothing, groceries, fashion accessories, African and Caribbean food, all under one roof. Ethnic Isle is also providing a door-to-door delivery service to your families in the Gambia. Tell your friends and families back home, Ethnic Isle is here for easy and hassle-free shopping on www.ethnicisles.com. Any information, contact our friendly admin. We're here to help. Ethnic Isles is our own.
Sponsor a Gambian girl through SAG Foundation. We are placing girls on the path to success through education. Our aim is to realize a Gambia where every girl is given equal access to education to reach their full potential. This is how we do it through our model of affecting generational systematic change. This is Amy. She is not in school, an underprivileged girl excluded from school due to lack of financial support. The SAG Foundation enrolled her into school, and she is equipped with all the essential resources to have a quality education. Amy is now making a difference in her community. Amy is now contributing towards the generational systematic change. Education changes everything for a girl.
Live in one.
Proper healthcare system, that's what I expect. Now I fehe go here, that's what I expect. New control borders, that's what I expect. Cancel flights, stage airport me, that's what I expect. Nah legi ñun ñep ñu ci njaaxare ndaxte feebar bi ak gaawa waa ale. So stay at home asa bopp ak ñi la jege oyto ndeku te def lu digle noonu leen ko mun a xeexee. They know it's hard moo tax njëg gi lu ne di gën a cher. Lu doon jar benn ñu def ko 10 like they don't care. The poor crying ku si am nang leen jàppale te yàlla na li jeex ba bés ñëw ñu du ko nettali. Wash your hands for your sake cause our lives are at stake. Nañ aar xale yi avoid marché bi tasaare campé yi ba duñ gis saat ndaje fi pour ñu daan corona il faut ñu toppa charte yi.
Korole nataka dunia kumbondi akile tubake wole munyantoti kambulu kusafondola nyobulu dosetala nibe totola dukareda mura.
Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds or more with soap and water, alcohol-based hand rub or more. Cover your nose and mouth with Kexx elbow when you cough or sneeze. Nadore chio nakfagarun from this killing disease. Yala bana lulu yaga na yo balanga judu. Neko ne lip ngai bai chi lokhom yo wit nanga mwetu. Please take this COVID-19 seriously and limit movement. Stay at home, protect yourself and stop the visitations.
Banyana link, banyana bikira. Dabule njaka mobu pato makachilia Sicilia ni Lilian Ndanyowa ninya sakuler mamenda chipapulia Nyowa ninya mcho kula ni mcho mwina tiji Pumak piring Channel the tap to go to lole Call it 1025
Hey papa nyi aye nyi corona bandi manje Nyowa ni nyenu tefon kata wala ban beno Corona bibu nora ni banyana Sembati manyana Jurari banyan, swear to God, if dinner cool, my people dinner cool, God juradun, ay, corona go far, ay, korole nataka dunia kumbondi, akile tubake, wole munyantolti, kambulu kusafonola, nyobulu dosetala.